to admit as soon as we'll be asked to admit new participants, but I propose to start the event. Good afternoon, Europe. Good morning, New York and Vancouver. Welcome to Chapter 0 Romania and Climate Governance Initiative event series. Thank you for joining to our discussion on how sustainability should be embedded into strategic planning to improve organizations' resilience and enhance value creation. I just want to start by thanking to Chapter 0 Romanian Climate Governance Initiatives for the opportunity to bring such an interesting topic, an actual theme, to our members, executives, consultants, and other professionals. I will start by introducing Chapter 0 and the Climate Governance Initiative, our host today. Chapter 0 is creating in UK, Romania, and around the world a community of business leaders by mobilizing the board, non-executive directors to promote the implementation of the World Economic Forum's principle for effective climate governance. Chapter 0 members are helping and they are providing assurance that their companies are fit for the future and that global net zero ambitions are transformed into robust plans and measurable actions. For today, we aim to provide you a practical and pragmatic perspective on how to integrate sustainability in decision-making, improving organization resilience, and enhance value creation. I have the privilege to put together 4 sustainability professionals to discuss and share their opinions and to give us the opportunity to find out from their experience, from their practice, on how sustainability should be addressed and embedded into day-to-day business. A way to provide assurance to shareholders on value creation, resilience, and long-term sustainable growth is to embed sustainability into the decision-making and long-term strategic planning. I'm gonna introduce resilience, and then I will let my participants, my panelists, to continue and to extend the discussions. Give me 1 second to share my screen and then to start couple of slides by presenting a couple of slides. Are you seeing? Yes. According to our agenda, I will set up the scene. Then Irina will continue to extend discussion on sustainability and current challenges and risks. Brandon will offer his perspective, his risk management perspective on sustainability according to TCFD recommendations. Andrei will introduce energy transition and how energy transitions is part of sustainability transformation. And Mihnea will talk on current mandatory sustainability reporting under EU requirements. And in the end, we're gonna have the chance to answer to your questions and to engage into a discussion between the participants and panelists. At the end, we're gonna be able to have the first conclusions of our event, and we'll use these conclusions to think on the next Chapter 0 Romania event. I'm gonna start by presenting you, as you well know, the current geopolitical and economic context. Institutions are facing increasing risk from an evolving, more fragmented geopolitical landscape. As global companies are facing a more volatile geopolitical environment, geopolitical risks has climbed to the top of the agenda for many organizations, for many boardrooms, and CEOs and policy makers are struggling to navigate through this volatile landscape. According to the latest McKinsey outlook from March, economic and geopolitical instability is the major current concern among executives. At the same time, concerns over financial market volatility have grown after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank in March. The current survey also marks that the first time since March 2019, when the financial market volatility as a specific risks ranked within the top 3 risks to global growth. All these current concerns are huge challenges to be addressed and to be managed by organizations and their executives. In this context, inflation, financial market volatility, rising interest rates, all these being interconnected are among the top global risks to future growth and sustainable development. What is resilience? We know that to be resilient, sometimes it's the ability to cope or to effectively manage an unexpected situation. But in such volatile environment, resilience is more than just the ability to recover quickly. In business, resilience means dealing with adversity and shocks and continuously adapting for growth. Truly resilient organizations don't just bounce back better, they actually thrive in hostile environment. The resilience agenda addresses 6 themes, which become deeply interconnected areas of action. The linkages from theme to theme and the vulnerabilities within the theme must be explored, and that initiative in one area can be aligned with the goals of the others. From geopolitical to climate change, from supply chain security to people education, healthcare, and technological challenges, all these areas should be addressed and should be effectively managed in order to be able to cope with different challenges, with risks, but also being ready to seize opportunities. In the end, sustainability is much more than a disclosing exercise. It's much more than an organizational objective. Sustainability supports value creation, and it's one of my preferred discussion, providing arguments on how sustainability should be addressed in order to transform the business model and fulfilling its objectives in terms of top line growth, cost reduction, legal interventions, a higher productivity, and an investment optimizations. Implementing sustainability principles and transforming the business model into a more sustainable one, organizations, private or public, will be able to support its their value creation by incorporating all these benefits of sustainability. We are aware that there are different models and different frameworks to address sustainability principles, to address climate-related risks, or to implement within certain industries as banking system and financial services, sustainability, climate change, and ESG. Probably the most recognized and well-known models and recommendations are from the risk management perspective, COSO, with its ESG integrations framework. From the climate-related, from the climate change perspective, we do have TCFD as a major climate disclosing framework, and I choose European Central Bank framework to integrate climate-related risk within the financial and banking system. My colleagues will extend discussions regarding resilience and how sustainability should be addressed, effectively managed, and in the end embedded into decision making to increase resilience. And for the first part of the discussion, I will invite Irina to present her perspective on sustainability, resilience, and the major challenges implementing sustainability. Irina, please.
Sure. Thank you so much, Bogdan. Just as a very quick background with respect to AMNI International and what we were about. So I founded this company about 3 years ago, really with the intent of creating a performance-based approach to integrating sustainability and ESG on the materiality side of the scale into essentially asset management, investors, portfolios, and of course, operating companies. And the corporate side of that equation as well, really trying to make the left talk to the right, if you will. And I don't, no, pun intended, I will say. And I would also like to explain that about 2 years into what was actually quite a successful consulting endeavor, what came to my realization is that it's relatively uncomplicated to conduct, if you have the digital technologies at your hand, a materiality assessment. Okay, you just need to do your engagement, select your frameworks, understand the compliance, engage legal counsel. I see Brendan, you're nodding, you're saying yes, 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 right? So we can go through the motions that, rock the oceans relatively intelligently, and conduct the market research. However, what I came to realize is that there's a point in time where this breaks down, and it's hard to go back and assess where exactly did we get it wrong? Where did this greenwashing risk, and liability come from that was not what was supposed to happen? And it's hard to then unpack where exactly you need to go back and improve your process or your governance structure. Very seldom do you want to go back and revisit your strategy. So why I'm providing this context is simply because, to me, when we start to, throw words out like sustainability and ESG and resilience, and probably we could come up with a few more that fit that bill. Conscious capitalism is one of my favorites, right? Without having a really solid understanding of what problem we are trying to address as an organization, where our core competencies actually directly create an opportunity, a financial opportunity for the company and its stakeholders. I hate that word, but I'm going to use it because we're in an ESG panel, right? And what risks we are effectively mitigating as a company. And every single person in your leadership team and then in the business functions can articulate that, you ultimately will end up in the same position of having to basically whack moles over the head once you've created your ESG report and plan and put it on your websites and started to put it into consumption. So my perspective on this, especially at this point in time, so if you had asked me what is my perspective on sustainability and resilience and ESG when I started this journey about 7 years ago, right, it would have been very different to what it is today. And what has changed, the way I see it, and certainly if we do our research, right, is that we are no longer at a point of we need to, mitigate. We need to have the foresight to see what's coming and mitigate as best we can by applying a lens of competencies. Where are we good at? Where are we not? And where do we want to be? We are actually now at a point in time where the risks that Bogdan, you laid out for us very well, right? Where we have rampant inflation, geopolitical risk, economic instability. People don't know how they are going to live. In aggregate, they don't know what's going to come to them. These are your employees, right? These are the communities in which you operate. If you don't have a stable environment and you have all sorts of safety risks, then how are you going to grow your company? So those risks, coupled with climate change as an accelerating force and tipping point, but also on the other side being wokenized, especially in the American side of the coin, right, which adds to the political instability. So these things are not unrelated. And then let's throw in AGI, right? AGI, so artificial general intelligence, which some people will argue is already here. Some people will say, we're not completely at the point of singularity yet. But when you look at all of these, I'm going to call them black swan risks, right, coming together and affecting the resilience of your organization. Well, what I believe that forces is every single company that wants to put an authentic ESG or sustainability agenda forward to understand how these different risks are impacting the different business functions of the organization, and to really consider the strategic business plan of where do we want to be and why do we need to exist? What problem are we really solving for? And that decision-making tree, as you highlighted, really, how do you unpack the decision-making agenda? To me, that becomes a cultural phenomenon. So nowhere on these frameworks do we talk about culture. But I think the further you go into the ESG conundrum and who thinks what and how do we engage people and how do we create the metrics and plans that we can stick to, because here's the reality. You can create a plan today and something happens tomorrow and it goes out the window. That's not resilience. That's a bunch of money thrown away, right? So to me, it goes back to how do you empower your leadership team to make decisions in a coherent way that is aligned with where this organization is going, and then be able to apply that common sense logic and purpose mindset of the company to their own particular business function. Because other than that, you're going to get dinged on the metrics and on the reporting. And what you want is people in your organization that are going to be able to mitigate against the risk of woke washing, greenwashing, and everything, and say, look, yes, we said that. We try to do that. Then, the Romania got invaded. We did not see that coming. I'm gonna be really controversial about these things because we don't know what is to come. right? So you have to plan for every possible scenario and realize that in the worst possible case, we still have a team, a culture in place that is taking care of its employees, and across every single one of our dimensions of materiality within our ESG framework, within our TCFD framework, people are competent and enabled at a cultural level within the organization. So to me, that's really hard to do, right? I know you want pragmatic, right?
Yes, we
And
want.
mindset and culture is certainly not pragmatic. But what I will say, to me, if you look across all these black swan risks and you do your Venn diagram and you look at the common denominator across all of them, what you will most likely come up with is the element of understanding of what it is that we're trying to do, and whether that has been embedded within the governance of the organization, so that you know you have the right people to represent your company and make the right decisions. Increasingly, it's about doing what's right, not just using we're mitigating risk, we're creating opportunity and all the jargon. We're doing this as the right thing to do for our people. And because we need to exist, because our company is providing a vital service to the people that we serve in these regions, right? This is the team that we have created, and these are the topics we're going to address. And we are not going to get into the political discussion of what we believe one side. We're going to do what's right for our people based on our belief system. It's taking the organization to a whole new level. But guess what? When you have the business roundtable saying the purpose is a big thing and not everything, then you have to take that seriously, or make a really bold statement. No, our purpose is not that. Our purpose is to make money, and we will just abide by the standards and regulations. There is courage in taking that approach. It might be the right thing for the organization, it might not. But if you want to be integral about resilience, I really suggest, going back and assessing whether you have the cultural readiness to embark on such an adventure.
Yeah. Having the right people in place to understand and to address all these challenges and emerging risks will enable organizations to be better prepared and to be effective in their way of becoming resilient and to thrive in the end. Setting the most challenging parts in terms of risk management, Brandon will provide us his perspective based on more than 35 years of experience as executive and non-executive directors in global financial services and sustainability. Brandon is a highly successful and seasoned professional currently focused on the intersection of technology, ESG, and sustainability strategy. Brandon, please share your opinions.
Okay, thank you, Bogdan, and thank you, Irina. You will see, coincidentally, a lot of the messages that I have and I will share actually repeat what Irina has said, and I'll contextualize them. So really happy about that, because we did not prepare this in advance. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Calling here from New York, delighted to be here, so thank you very much. In terms of what can you guys all see my screen first of all?
Yes.
Perfect. It's not letting me move. Oh, there you go. In terms of what I will cover, just give a brief introduction to myself. Then I'll set the context. My focus is going to be on risk management, and particularly in the context of TCFD. Why TCFD and not COSO and not the European framework? Honestly, TCFD is as good as any. They all have their pluses and minuses. TCFD, I believe, is becoming the de facto emerging standard. Whether or not it's called that, in the US, it'll probably, for political reasons, be called something different. But that's the standard that I'll use. So I'll set the context, then I'll go straight into the risk management aspects of TCFD. But at the same time, talking about, although TCFD has 4 pillars, there is a lot of interdependence across from governance to strategy to risk management to metrics and targets. So I'll do that, and then I'll finish with some practical considerations here, because let's face it, TCFD only came out 2017. It's like 6 years old. It's really, really nascent, and we're in a very nascent, environment right now. But unfortunately, we've got a clock that's ticking there, very, very urgent, that needs a resolution. So I'll try and pull all that together. So first of all, about me, as you can tell, I'm not from New York, born and bred in Scotland, now reside in New York City. But in the meantime, I lived and worked in London, Hong Kong, Sydney, New York the first time round, then Paris, and now back to New York. Married with 1 daughter. Educationally, Scotland, undergraduate mathematics, computer science, postgraduate with certified accountants in the UK, corporate governance in the UK, sustainability, and then given my move from financial services to sustainability, I focused obviously on sustainability risk, given my background in risk management. In terms of my experience was heavy, finance, audit, financial systems, CFO, strat planning. Then I moved on to the general management track, running the travel business for Amex, then the payments business for Europe, then international, and then in the US. That was my day job. Meanwhile, when I was in London, I joined, and the catalyst actually for the interest and the passion for sustainability was I joined the board of the UK regulator for the energy markets. And frankly, it was with a lot of trepidation. They were looking for someone commercial. I was looking to learn different environments. So I learned all about energy, renewable energy, solar, et cetera, and got really interested in it. So much so that when Amex asked me to come back and run the US business, I was like, yeah, I'll do that. I want to keep this job. And I want to prepare myself for life after financial services. So that's what I did. And I look at what I bring here is a combination of, obviously the energy experience, but also good global financial experience. And I tie all that together because I think that's really, really important in this arena, to have people that are, financially aware, let's say. So then let's turn to TCFD. I talked about it. TCFD, as many of you will be aware, was really like the brainchild of the G7, the G20, when they basically said back in 2015, hey, these climate risks are real. They could potentially get very big, and we should start to think about how we deal with this. So we put together a group of central bankers and others, and they came out with the first report, the first recommendation, the first framework, 2017. What I like about it, there's specific areas for banks, asset owners, asset managers, and insurance, which we can come back to separately. As I mentioned, it is, causes obviously a strong framework as well, as is the European Central Bank. But TCFD seems to have been adopted, certainly in the UK, in New Zealand, Singapore, Canada as well, but there's conditions on it in Canada, et cetera, et cetera. So it looks like, whether or not it's called TCFD, I think the thinking behind it, the 4 pillars that Bogdan talked about, will prevail. And we'll talk about that in a second. As of last October or November, they do an annual report. They had like roughly 4,000 supporters, including 1,500 of the largest financial institutions around the world, which have an asset under management base of 217 trillion, spanning like almost 100 countries or so. In terms of just sound bites here, as I said, TCFD is a framework to help customers think through how they should disclose climate-related risks. That's really what it's about. Whereas you may have heard of GRI. GRI is really more about helping companies disclose the impact that they believe that they're having on the external environment. And then TCFD and CDP, what's the interaction there? CDP, as you know, is the major data repository for people to report. TCFD and CDP have developed an automated interface so that you basically, when you report, as and when you report to CDP, your TCFD reports can go in there and be housed there. So that's what's happening there. Just very briefly, Bogdan covered this. He used the same diagram, so I'm really happy about that. Essentially, similar to the other frameworks, there's essentially 4 pillars, if you like, 4 dimensions, all of them critically important in their own right, each of them very interdependent upon the other areas. And I'll give you some examples of that in a second. But essentially, the 4 pillars are governance, strategy, risk management, metrics and targets. And I think you will find when you look at this in real life, adopting this approach, really is quite cohesive, quite comprehensive, and it's certainly all-encompassing. Underlying these 4 pillars now, there's like 12 critical dimensions of questions that need to be answered. I'm not going to go through all, sorry, there's 11, sorry. I'm not going to go through all 11, but rather I'm just going to focus purely on risk management. Because, okay, and we'll stop and pause on risk management. Why? Because risk management is all about how does your organization identify, assess, and manage and report your climate-related risks. So that's really what the risk management pillar is about. And there's aspects to that, such as describing the underlying process for identifying, and we'll get into this in a second, describing the processes for managing climate-related risks, how are they mitigated, how are they reported, etc., and describe how processes for identifying, assessing, and managing the risks are integrated, number 1, into the overall risk management, of the company, of the organization, but also how are they integrated into the overall strategy of the organization. And we'll talk about that in a second. So this takes you now to the next level of detail of questions. There's a whole series of questions that sit against these. And as I said, these questions will differ depending on whether you're a bank, an asset owner, an asset manager, or an insurer within the financial services arena. For a bank, for example, the focus is largely, not totally, but largely on their loan portfolio. What emissions are they in term financing? So if you look at Citi, JP, the large banks, they're what they call scope 3 emissions, finance emissions, are in excess of 90–95% of their total portfolio emissions. So very, very significant from that perspective. But just to bring a couple of these to life, we'll just go to the next page here. You will see, have climate-related risk owners been involved, blah, blah, blah. The reason I pull that out is, if you look at the governance aspect of this, and Irina talked about this, governance is all about making sure that you have the right people with the right qualifications at the right level of the organization, with the right reporting relationships, preferably C-level, C-suite. They have been charged with responsibility, ownership for climate-related risks. You can't have this buried 5 levels down in the organization in the public affairs arena or HR or whatever. No offense to public affairs or HR, but it's just not the right place to have the right level of visibility. Second pull-out point here, and again, something that Irina touched on, has your organization identified the climate-related risks that may impact the organization's strategic and operational plans? They cannot, the strategy, as Irina pointed out, cannot sit on a shelf and be independent of the climate-related risks. If you are, and this is part of being resilient, if you are a resilient organization, you should be able to identify these risks pretty rapidly and then quickly reflect them in your organizational strategic plan so that that can be tuned and reflected and reported and communicated on. Then another couple of, I'll jump over this. Let me pull out another couple of points here. And this more is on the, has your organization selected and documented data, parameters, assumptions, really for scenario analysis. Scenario analysis is quite an involved, complicated analysis that basically looks at different potential pathways that your organization could experience and the implications financially and otherwise of experiencing those pathways. There's huge amounts of data, huge amounts of assumptions that go into that, all of which really are critical and have to be reviewed and fine-tuned, over time. The second pull out here is, has your organization leveraged subject matter experts? I think that's important because although this is now like its own standalone risk category in many cases, like liquidity risk, market risk, reputational risk, etc., climate risk, really has, like those other categories have experts. Climate risk you have to ensure that you're involving the appropriate level of people there. So that's that. And then the last, I'm going to jump over the resilience versus sustainability. But the last point I wanted to make is these are just practical considerations. And there's various considerations here. Number one, data availability. What you find here in relating to emissions, to climate related risks, etc., there's data everywhere and there's no single central repository of it. There's multiple owners, there's multiple interfaces, internal parties, external parties, third parties, etc. So that's the first thing to be aware of. Second thing is the importance of baselining and measuring the organizational emissions, scope 1, scope 2, and particularly scope 3, just given some of the complexity there. Scenario analysis, we touched on. There's lots of critical assumptions, lots of data that goes into that. That has to be really vetted and analyzed very carefully. The last couple of things I would say is, and I touched on this at the beginning, this is a new and emerging area, and we are all learning. So we're all trying our best to learn this as we go. So my advice to people often is, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. Because I think if we relentlessly insist on 99.9% accuracy here, we're never going to get to the answer. So I'm a big believer, if you can get 80% of the way there, go with that and then refine it over time. Anyway, let me leave it there. I'm conscious of time. So thank you. Over to you. Back to you, Bogdan.
Thank you, Brandon, for your valuable opinions and perspective. And considering that food, water, energy, and climate change are interconnected challenges, both public and private sector organizations need to solve the resilience equation to achieve an energy transition that is secure, affordable, and clean. And I will introduce you Andrew. Andrew is an international energy and climate change expert. His activity focuses on climate and energy policies, concentrating on the energy transition process and its geopolitical, economic, and social challenges. Andrew is currently co-chair of Task Force on Digitalization in Energy and a vice chair of the group of experts on energy efficiency, United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Chapter Zero. Thank you, Bogdan, for that invitation. I'm very happy to be here today. And it's already very difficult to bring interesting ideas on the table after you, Bogdan, after Irina, after Brendan presentation and the ideas that you put forward. But I'll give it a try with a few conceptual ideas, let's say, on the energy transition, as you mentioned. And I'll obviously start from what we all know that happened in the previous 2 years. It started in 2021. It peaked, let's say, in 2022. The crisis, the war in Ukraine, and the geopolitical factors that actually generated this commodity scarcity, and also betting on potential social unrest in Europe. All this led to the gas crisis, which generated a price crisis and an inflationary crisis. We all know that. We've seen that. We've felt that. And that happened mostly because Europe became too dependent on a very limited number of suppliers, energy suppliers, and in particular with one supplier for oil, gas, and coal. And this is obviously not a resilient strategy, is actually the opposite of that. So in this context, the risk probably of this development of the energy systems, the risk was not fully assessed, or if it was assessed, it was not communicated to the population, the citizens, the voters. And that is actually a very difficult operation. And if we draw a parallel, believe it or not, it's kind of the same in some businesses when shareholders are sometimes spared from bad news or from risk factors. And that is because we were talking a bit earlier that we are all, one way or the other, we are discounting the future. We are over-evaluating what we have today versus what we can have or we need to have in the future. And that is exactly the opposite of what resilience and sustainable development are about. One is to think about the future, the upcoming risks, and to prepare in advance for this. But humans have the tendency of disregarding, or to put it mildly, discounting the future. It is in our nature to not to plan too much for the future and just focus on what we have. But this needs to change because both resilience and sustainable development need to become a habit, need to become a second nature of both policymakers and the businesses. And resilience and especially sustainability should be more than just reporting indicators and measuring metrics, I believe. It really needs to become a new way of running things, of planning things, and obviously executing things, if we are serious about getting closer to the climate neutrality goals. But coming back to this idea of how resilience and sustainability are linked, or are they synonymous or not, they have a lot in common. Resilience and sustainable development have a lot in common, in my view. And to some extent, they are synonymous because sustainability, at the end of the day, is resilience over time, right? Resilience over the time factor, preserving current conditions over time, over generations. So at the end of the day, we can draw some parallels between that. But moreover, I think resilience and sustainable development are very complex, obviously, and multi-layered aspects. And we should understand, and people tend to disregard that when it comes to both resilience, but especially to sustainability, is not only the environment. Obviously, we are all concerned about climate and climate change and the effects of that. And we are doing our best to somehow raise the awareness or to move the needle a bit in the right direction. But it's not only about the environment, it's not only about climate. It's also about sustainability. It's also about basic social aspects. It's also about the economy. And this is what the highlight that I would like to give, coming back to the energy sector. The economy the economic dimension is a very important, arguably the most important part of what sustainability and sustainable development should be, in my view. So I'll give you two examples on that. So when it comes to resilience, people always say, or we've heard over the past year, people say that Europe should have been more resilient when it comes to the energy crisis that we faced. We should have been more resilient, should have deployed faster, for instance, alternative sources, renewable sources. But that couldn't have happened without a very strong social foundation and social cohesion. It couldn't have happened without people, for instance, understanding the need to accelerate this energy transition process, without being willing to pay more for the same utility at the end of the day, so higher prices, but the same utility, the same end result for that. So in other words, having a high social resilience would have been a prerequisite to decreasing dependence on one commodity and one supplier. But unfortunately, we didn't have that. We didn't have as high of a social cohesion and social, let's say, resilience as we would have wanted, because otherwise this transition and this dependence on only one supplier would have been lower or would have been differently managed over the years. So that's one example on the resilience side. The other example is on the sustainability. A lot of people, when they say sustainability and they refer to the energy sector, they only consider climate and climate change and mostly mitigation actions on how to address the energy transition and the current energy systems. But I'll give you a very strange example, probably a contrarian, let's say, example. Bogdan and I have talked about this, so it's not new to him, but it's quite a strange example. Sustainability is also, again, if I may, mainly about economic sustainability in my belief. And I'm not, the example that I'm about to give is related to oil majors. I'm not a fan, I'm not a big fan of oil majors. As you can imagine, my day-to-day life is promoting and helping the transition process and promoting clean and renewable technologies, of course. But not being a fan still without being a fan, I still understand the role and how their context is very, very important at the beginning. This is a very separate conversation on how to tax oil majors, and this is an important conversation. But current oil rigs of these oil majors have a very high depletion rate. So operators are extracting lower volumes for the same costs that they are putting there. So without additional investments of these oil majors, volumes will continue to decrease. Therefore, lower volumes, higher prices. Now, I understand, and once again, I agree with the need to invest in renewables, of course, but not investing in new oil rigs to ensure to secure this, at least the same flow of volumes of crude volumes will actually become economically unsustainable. And this is actually a need, a prerequisite to actually finance the energy transition. Without having that, without having funds from that, gained in different ways, even through clawback taxes and windfall taxes, even through those kind of mechanisms, we will not be able to actually finance the energy transition, and we will not be able to finance that, especially in developing areas that need external economic support. Just short remarks on the business side. We've seen an increased attention on ESG, and we were talking about that. But we've also seen, let's say, artificial jumps from philanthropy directly to the ESG frameworks. Not experiencing, for instance, shared value systems and philosophies. Not even having, let's say, sane or prolonged corporate social responsibility strategies. It's and just jumping from philanthropy to ESG frameworks and reporting. I don't think that's, once again, sustainable. And that applies to businesses in general and applies to some energy subsectors as well, of course, but it applies in general to business, I believe. And maybe we can expand that a bit later in our conversation. But I think that's also a concern. Just 3 points on concluding everything. I would end with very brief 3 ideas. A very general one would be to, for everyone, decision makers and businesses, to properly and fully understand what resilience is and what sustainability is, what's embedded in these concepts. Not jumping to preconceived conclusions is also paramount in developing a sane and sustainable, let's say, business and society moving forward. So I think proper understanding of everything that is embedded in these concepts is a prerequisite, and it's paramount in delivering and getting closer to our climate goals. Also, 2 points on what Irina has mentioned before, because that really, I really felt that she had a very good point, 2 very good points. I do agree with the idea of planning for black swans and planning for all the risks, but also planning for everything translates into cost and time. I mean, cost both financially and time, right? So probably there is a need to strike a balance between proper risk assessment and action. So faster energy transition, less energy political tensions, more effective climate action that is needed. And how to do that and how to strike this balance is actually the tricky part. But I do agree with planning at least more than we did in the past. You know, everything is a very strange concept, but planning for more things or taking into account more things that we did in the past is absolutely necessary. Also, on Irina's point on how purpose ought to be the ultimate goal, I do agree with that. Once again, I fully agree with that. But once again, I'm coming back with what I've started. At the end of the day, we are unfortunately still built to discount the future. So purpose by definition is not something related to today or tomorrow. It's actually something that is a long-term goal, a long-term vision. So somehow addressing this philosophy and transitioning from this idea of discounting the future and, you know, valuing more what we have today and trying to put into perspective what we need tomorrow would probably get us closer to, you know, this idea of reaching or getting closer to the purpose and to having this purpose-driven businesses and societies and communities as a whole. I will end here, and yeah, very much looking forward to engaging with everyone in the conversation. Thank you very much once again for having me.
Thank you, Andrei. Just one thing before to let Mihnea to talk on sustainability reporting. Too often we talk on sustainability from corporate perspective, from private organization, banks, yeah, financial services. Okay, we forget that sustainability should be embedded in our day-to-day lives. Yeah. And unfortunately, I do understand oil and gas philosophy and traditional business model. And I agree at some point that as long as the consumers keep asking fossil fuel energy, yeah, there are something to produce it. So probably from time to time, we need to switch from corporate sustainability to consumer sustainability, and should embed sustainability not only in the business model, but in our own lives, transforming our consumer behavior, yeah, to a more sustainable life and a business model as individuals, as households, as families. So we need to address these challenges as well, because otherwise the big oils will keep struggling to find resources to feed and to fill these needs. Thank you, Andrei.
Thank you very much.
Under the current EU sustainability reporting requirements, the focus on sustainability is no longer optional or voluntary, but mandatory, and must be embedded in the company's long-term vision and strategy, and must also be applied in its policies. From this perspective, from European requirements on sustainability reporting, Mihnea will show us the major challenges, and probably we're gonna explain us the main areas of EU sustainability reporting. Mihnea?
Thank you, Bogdan. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the preoccupation of the spectators to learn about these topics. We are in changing times, so to say. I won't emphasize on the subjects already discussed. Sustainability and mostly sustainability reporting is being easily integrated into the purpose of holistic reporting of the companies, because it's pretty obvious that financial reporting isn't enough anymore, and we need more. I don't want to, or I have to acknowledge the importance of sustainability, of voluntary sustainability reporting, because I am a GRI certified sustainability professional. I have to acknowledge also the benefits of the other perspective of sustainability reporting, basically the inwards aspect, the aspect that it's being generated by the climate risks, the aspects presented by Brendan earlier. But I am here to discuss about the regulation basically surrounding sustainability. And I have to acknowledge also the fact that many of the world's economies are supported by SMEs, but at this point, at least in the European Union, we are talking about sustainability reporting for the large companies. But in the time to come, this will change. And I will also would like to share a little bit my screen. I have here a slide that basically presents the current situation of the regulation surrounding sustainability. So, of course, as maybe a lot of you know, the companies in Romania who have more than 500 employees, they are asked to report under the non-financial reporting directive. Basically, this is a non-financial declaration. It's like another version of the sustainability report or of the voluntary sustainability report. And it should present basically the main topics, the main important topics of a company in relation to sustainability. This NFRD has also a guide that basically teaches companies how to do this type of reporting. If we were to analyze this guide, we would know that it reaches the double materiality aspect. It's based on TCFD, it's based on GRI, so basically it comprises the entire material aspects that could relate to sustainability in one company's situation. And this being now only for companies with 500 employees plus, average number during a year, we have to take into consideration that these things will change, and soon the CSRD will come into force. And this CSRD basically will widen the scope of the reporting companies. It will be first applied for the same companies, 500 plus employees, but then from the following year, and I'm talking about 2025 with the first year of reporting in 2026, the scope will widen, and also large companies that meet the following 2 out of 3 criteria, so 250 employees plus or 40 million euro turnover or 20 million euros assets on the balance sheet. So 2 out of these 3 criteria, if they will be met, companies, large companies will fall under the scope of the CSRD, and even more in 2026 financial year, so reporting in 2027, but with the possibility to opt and report in starting with 2028. Also, the listed SMEs will fall under the scope of the CSRD. So basically, we will go for mandatory reporting for somewhere from 11,000 companies to almost 50,000 companies. So this is a big game changer in the mandatory, as Bogdan said, sustainability reporting. Even more, we will go from a guidance-based type of sustainability, which is under the NFRD, to a very, very specific standards-based reporting. So we will have sustainability reporting standards that are currently under development, but they are very close, developed in according to the GRI perspective, in accordance with the TCFD perspective. Even if you look at these draft standards that are now released, for now we have 12 standards, 2 general applicable standards, guidance standards, and 10 topical standards. And soon, almost 39 or around 39, sector standards will have to follow. And these sector standards and topical standards, basically the topical standards and the general applicable standards, which are the sector agnostic standards, have the basis for conclusion published for now. And in these documents, you can actually see the mapping between these standards and very well-known frameworks or standards like TCFD or GRI. So it's nothing new. It's based on what we know. And in my opinion, this is a big game changer to sustainability reporting. Of course, Brendan can tell us the situation with IFRSs in the United States and their sustainability standards, which will be embedded by many other countries outside of the EU. Another point of this regulation surrounding this sustainability topic is the SFDR. It's the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. So basically, this is type of sustainability reporting for financial market participants, investment funds, insurers, credit institutions, pension funds, and so on. So these are the financial market participants. They have a very specific standard, a regulation actually, that applies to them, and they have to report accordingly. This is, if you want, like sustainability report for these types of financial undertakings. It focuses on principal adverse impacts. So basically, an investment that could harm sustainable development. And also it defines 3 types of products. So 3 types of investment products, so to say. A green type, a light green type, a dark green type, and a neutral type. So basically, investment funds will have to relate to these 3 types of products that they offer, and also to disclose their treatment according to the principal adverse impacts. Last but not least, the most comprehensive regulation surrounding sustainability is the EU taxonomy. I left it for last, not because it's the most comprehensive, but it's going now under the NFRD, and it will be into force also under the CSRD. It also amends the SFDR, and it is supposed to be, without getting into very much detail, the common language for sustainability development, for sustainability reporting. So basically, if a stakeholder would look at this type of reporting, if it were to interpret the taxonomy reporting, he would have to the possibility actually to get a very, very good idea and a very precise one on the orientation of the certain reporting organization towards green, towards sustainable development, towards sustainability. There's a lot to be said here about these types of regulation, but this was like a high-level overview. Thank you once again for your invitation, and I'm looking forward to receiving questions in the open part of the discussion. So back to you, Bogdan.
Thank you, Mihnea. I would like to add that addressing mandatory sustainability reporting or following TCFD, climate-related disclosing, it is important. It's a key aspect for all organizations to understand that keeping reporting, disclosing on certain aspects in isolation with no integration and with no deeper transformation process in terms of addressing ESG factors, managing climate-related risks and opportunities, or embedding ESG principle will let them in isolation also, because reporting, disclosing should be integrated with a good and effective governance structure, with effective processes to identify and manage risks and opportunities, integrated in strategic planning, and in the end, reporting and disclosing is the final step as an outcome of the entire process of transformation or integration, sustainability principles, and business model. Otherwise, the companies and the boards will experience blind spots, will experience a lack of understanding of a full spectrum of risks and opportunities, focusing only on public relations, corporate public marketing, and greening their image. Thank you, Mihnea.
Thank you, Bogdan.
We are at the last part of the event, and we are keen to find out your opinions and to find out how the participants received the opinions and perspectives, being ready to answer to your questions. So we are here to have a dynamic and vibrant discussions and ready to engage. So, questions? Or we can share, or we can ask between us what do we feel about what we have been talking about, different perspectives, different experiences, and different approaches, otherwise quite integrated, interlinked, with overlapping areas of sustainability to be addressed and effectively managed. Carmen.
Bogdan, if there,
Irina, please.
yeah, so I guess while people maybe get their thoughts, you know, and together and ask some questions, perhaps one of the things that came to mind as I was hearing Michna actually talk about European regulation, and also Brendan kind of look at the TCFD integration. I'm just curious, you know, to get your perspectives. I do most of my work with North American based companies, but that work with a lot of companies in Europe. Right. So from a reporting perspective, you know, there's a lot of integration required there. So I'm really curious to get your thoughts and really just kind of open as to how do you really help companies that are actually going to have to report on both sides of the equation, and particularly on the supply side of that with respect to, you know, what they should be getting ready for. And this to me goes back to Andre's point around financial sustainability. Anyone have this problem?
I'm not there yet with this problem, but I'm hearing questions around me, and what can I say in regards to the EU taxonomy? I think that this won't be a problem for companies from outside Europe who don't have the obligation somehow to report because they are somehow under the I don't know, regulatory reach of the European Union. I think that they will avoid reporting on this very, very comprehensive regulation. But in regards to the CSRD, which basically will make the sustainability reporting mandatory, and in comparison with the IFRS's S standards, so basically the sustainability reporting standards, in my opinion, there's not such a big difference, because in one way or another, we are always turning to basically more or less, in my opinion, two standards and one framework. So TCFD being the framework and the standards being GRI and SASB. So basically, if the company has implemented that sustainability due diligence process that Brendan has described very, very well, so that process to identify, to assess, to prioritize, to deal with sustainability related matters, it can adapt easily to any standard. And even more, there are appearing on the market more and more tools that basically help companies with this reporting. And these tools, I mean, some of the tools I have seen have the capacity to basically extract the useful information from a GRI report or from a ESRS report in the near future and map it with the requirements of the IFRS's sustainability standards reporting. So basically this reporting will be sorted out, but the importance here is that it must be more than just storytelling, because I have been seeing now in a lot of the big companies voluntary sustainability reports a lot of storytelling. So it's just about I don't know, marketing, and it should be more focused on tangible things, and tangible things that come with sustainability. I think, in my opinion, there are not that many to really focus on. So we have the GHG accounting, and we have some very specific other KPIs that relate to water consumption, energy consumption, of course, looking also into the value chain. But we should focus less on developing policies that take hours to read, and focus more on the metrics, basically, and the targets. I don't know if this answers your question, but
It does. I don't agree with you, by the way, on the storytelling. I agree that marketing and PR has become a bit of a non-believable situation, but I think if people don't understand the why and why we're changing, that doesn't necessarily create the type of cohesion that's needed to report on quantifiable things in a way that is believable. I think there are two separate sides of the coin when it comes to metrics. The qualitative needs to have some backing, and you need to be able to substantiate that with real outcomes and boots on the ground. And I think the quantitative, to your point, on scope 1 to 3, 1, 2 at least, emissions is very well taken in terms of the common denominator between the EU regulation and the North American. So yeah, thank you, Micha.
sure.
I think the answer is good storytelling. So I agree with you there, Irina, but with key measurable milestones along the way. So i.e., it's no longer good enough to come out and say, yeah, we will be net zero by 2040, just go away and leave us. I think providing, and I think this is hopefully where the SEC regulations will go in the US when we get them, that there will be tangible milestone measurements along the way to make sure that Irina just doesn't show up and say, I'll see you in 30 years, we're going to be okay. Irina needs to show a 5-year or 10-year plan along the way for those deliverables. That's the first thing I would say. Second thing is, in terms of, as you're all aware, there's been a plethora, a flood of carbon accounting systems on the market, given the impending regulations. Some are better than others, but several of them are now having bolt-on TCFD interfaces, so that the baseline will be carbon accounting. But then for your TCFD reporting, it will extract the relevant parts of that and feed it in and create the base of a TCFD report. So that will help, I think, as we go forward. And clearly they will be refined to reflect the regulations.
That's a really good point, Brendan. I might reach out to get your thoughts on which ones you'd recommend.
Oh, definitely. So last year, when I moved into this role, we evaluated in-depth. We did an in-depth evaluation of 5, 6, and we've selected, at this point in time, we've selected 2 and about to be 3 that we will promote to our customers. And now we have developed a partnership with one of the, I would say, the leading provider at the intersection of technology and sustainability, based in the Pacific Northwest. And we're now an accredited implementation partner for them, and we're doing other things as well. But there's
fantastic.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear the name and see if it's different than mine.
Good.
Listening to you, all of you, I'm thinking to a final challenge. Considering that I'm the chairman of the board and we have just established a sustainability governance in my organization with a dedicated and accountable sustainability manager, what would be, from your perspective, from your every single perspective, the most practical advice to my board to be considered in terms of effectiveness of our measures to make sustainability governance effective, to have an effective, successful, effective risk management process integrated in strategy, and in the end, with an effective and compliant sustainability reporting. One single practical example from you. Irina?
Develop your ethos. Why do we need to exist? What are our guiding principles? And what is our foundational code of decision making? If you can agree on that, good luck. But then the rest will not be so hard. I would argue. That's my little tip.
Brandon?
I would say, in addition to what Irina said, I would say be very clear about what your short-term, medium-term, and longer-term deliverables are. They have to be very specific, measurable, actionable, and time-bound.
From energy transition perspective, to be integrated in our risk management process?
With so many challenges that you've listed, probably to pay more for your sustainability manager. But jokes aside, I'm cheating here, but I think that the proper advice would be, a combination of what Irina and Brendan have said. Plan in advance and plan accordingly with the risks that you have on the plate. But at the same time, don't look for perfection from the first second. Look for better, implementation and better planning. So I think striking a balance between that, which is, once again, that's why you're paying this sustainability manager, but striking a balance between these two, let's say, tensions would probably get you, into more advanced stages of implementing it.
Thank you, Andrei. Mihnea, from reporting perspective, what would say?
Continuity of reporting and bettering the report. But everything that's been said, it has to be taken into account. And I think that, not joking, but being extremely honest, at least talking from the perspective of having to deal with companies in Romania, pay more your sustainability manager, develop a team around him, and encourage them to report and to connect this information, because they won't be, even if they're not like very, very important from a regulator's perspective, because, okay, you get a fine and you move on if you don't have the NFRD or if you won't have the mandatory sustainability report, but this information will be important and very relevant for a lot of stakeholders, because everything, it will be soon interconnected. It is now, but it will be even more, while a lot of stakeholders will have the need for these information that are available or should be made available in these reports.
Yeah, thank you. I would add my perspective from the non-executive director perspective or chairman of the board. I would expect to have a holistic, strategic process to integrate sustainability principles, and with an effective risk management process in place, and in the end, with an honest, realistic disclosing a reporting exercise or a process.
Agreed.
Other questions ready to be to be discussed?
Yes, I have a question too, if I may.
Yes, please.
Livia Rașușdea is my name. I representing an energy company. I'm part of the executive management team. And I would like to address a question to Irene, because I noticed that the readiness of the organization might be a very important factor in the decision-making process for choosing the moment for starting the ESG journey within the company. My question would be, what may be the enablers, the accelerating factors that might influence in a positive way the preparation phase of the company? And the additional one, if you see the opportunity for having a chief sustainability officer among the executive team of the company. And it is also a second question, but let's hear the answer for the first one. And if I have the chance, I will address it also after that. Thank you.
Sure, sure, Liviana, and I'm happy to connect offline as well, just because from a time perspective. So I'm going to keep it really, really short, just to give you a quick kind of unfully reflected answer. In terms of things that can accelerate the readiness of the organization, 1,000,000% is establishing consensus within the leadership. And if there's a board, and if there's that cohesive leadership team, or whoever's making the decision, consensus on why we are doing this and what are our shared belief systems about ESG, like our ESG philosophy, you're going to come back and it's going to be horrible to go through this exercise, but it needs to be done, and it's going to be so much riskier and costlier if you don't do it up front. That consensus and leadership team will potentially lead to the appointment of a CSO, which I think can be beneficial. However, it can also distract people and make them feel like, I don't need to learn this because it's all going to be the CSO who's going to handle everything. And that role turns into a glorified budget allocation manager, corporate social responsibility person for PR purposes. If that's the case, steer away, but it can be helpful in terms of putting a governance system together for the organization to have that person appointed. I would just argue that person shouldn't be your marketing manager, because it creates a lot of other problems. But I'm happy to connect on this separately. What was your other question, if we have time?
Thank you. I think the second one might be addressed to everybody, because we have a newly set committee for climate change public policies. My question would be, what would be your recommendation for their first task, because it's quite newly appointed, as I said, for contributing to the process we have discussed before in the first question, sorry. So the first priority for this committee being part of our BOD.
I'm trying to let
I don't know if my question hasn't been clear enough, or
No. I will try to answer.
Okay.
Having a clear perspective of what you want to achieve, a clear set of realistic objectives will help you to design the roadmap and the action plan, and then to execute it step by step. Sustainability transformation and integration, it's a process, and it should be more than objectives by itself. It should be a purpose with clear objectives, and being aware that at the end of the process is not the perfection, it's a set of benefits, and you should be able to understand them and ready to size them one by one in terms of opportunities. You should be realistic, and you should be ready to for responsibility and accountability. From the top level perspective, the culture should be embedded top down, and accountability and responsibility as well should be embedded, should be transferred top down. It's a transformation. It's a transformation process.
Fair enough. It sounds logically. I will need some recommendation for best practices if we have here in Romania, or if not, if somebody can help us.
Yes,
with
we do
some
have
best practices from an energy company, even from the European level, it's fine for me. Or
yes,
I don't know,
do have
something which can help us to put the basis to start to set up the structure, the objectives, the roadmap, so on and so forth. Would be very helpful, and thank you very much for that.
We do have experience in energy sector and in oil and gas. I had the chance to be part of the oil and gas and energy story a couple of years, and ready to share from my experience, but also Andrei and other energy professionals are so deep involved and ready to provide advice, or at least to share from their experiences.
Thank you very much.
We can connect, and we should keep in charge. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, or Carmen?
Well,
as a board member and as our host, how do you think that sustainability process should be understood and then integrated from the board level?
well, in small steps, one by one. But anyway, it is a beginning for most of the companies to mitigate the risk and to understand, first of all, to understand the risk. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Thank you very much. And we really appreciate your contribution. The webinar will be posted on our website.